Welcome to IANGEL's CSW 70 parallel event, Building Hope, Advancing Gender Justice in Challenging Times. We're so delighted that you've joined us for this important and timely webinar. Please introduce yourselves and say where you are from in the chat. As our discussion progresses, please use the Q&A buttons to pose questions to avoid disrupting the flow. We will allow time for questions in the last 15 minutes or so of the program. My name is Nancy Newman. I am your moderator for this event. I am a real estate litigation partner with the California law firm of Hanson Bridget LLP. And I am the founder and the CEO of the International Action Network for Gender Equity and Law, which goes by its handy acronym IANGEL. IANGEL is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to harnessing the power of pro bono legal resources, that's lawyers, and deploying that power to advance gender equality locally, nationally, and globally. So we understand the challenges faced by gender justice advocates here and around the world. I know it is tough out there, and I can say, we feel you, sisters. Lawyers and advocates in our network are keenly focused on gender equality and access to justice, and our work with advocates from around the world has taught us important lessons about how we press forward, support each other, and stay strong in the face of setbacks. We know that if we despair, the other side wins, and we cannot let that happen. So this webinar will address the key task for all of us living in these times who care about the future of the world. How do we build hope? The brilliant writer Rebecca Solnit explained it this way. Hope is not a lottery ticket you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It's an axe you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures, and the grinding down of the poor and the marginal. To hope is to give yourself to the future. And that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. Indeed, in these turbulent times, the world needs civil society activists like all of us, all of you, to stay in the game and be even stronger and more determined than ever before. As an activist for over 50 years now, I'm inspired every day by the courage, resourcefulness, and commitment of civil society advocates, connecting across borders and fighting for a world that is worthy of our children. 4 of them are on our panel this afternoon, and it's my great pleasure to introduce them to you. Mawish Moazzam is a director of IANGEL, a Pakistani lawyer, and a doctoral candidate at the UC Berkeley School of Law, where she earned her LLM in international law. She has contributed research to IANGEL's Girls' Rights Project and earned an LLB and a Master's in Political Science in Pakistan. With over a decade of legal teaching and scholarship in Pakistan, her research examines comparative and international law, with particular emphasis on human rights, gender issues, and institutional fragmentation in legally plural systems. She also explores how digital technologies and identity infrastructures reshape legal status and gendered representation across borders. Natalia Urzola Gutierrez is a director of IANGEL and a primary investigator and leader of our Girls' Rights Project. Natalia is a Colombian environmental lawyer and an SJD candidate at the Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University. Natalia is the Colombian rapporteur of the Sabin Center's Global Peer Reviewers Network of Climate Litigation. Her research focuses on the intersection of environmental law and human rights from a critical and decolonial perspective. Her research covers the gendered impacts of climate change and highlights how climate and environmental crisis disproportionately affects historically marginalized groups. Shreya Mazumdar is a director of IANGEL, where she works on advancing women's and girls' rights through research and cross-border legal analysis. She's actively involved in IANGEL's Girls' Rights Project, contributing research and policy review on issues affecting women and girls across multiple countries from both domestic and international law perspectives. Shreya holds an LLM from the University of California, Berkeley, and brings over 8 years of experience as a corporate and technology lawyer in India, advising global clients on data protection, intellectual property, and cross-border transactions. Her work reflects a strong commitment to gender justice, equity, and social impact. And last but not least, Zubaida Akbar, the Afghanistan program manager at Femina and a close collaborator with IANGEL on research and advocacy for Afghan women and girls. She supports grassroots civic movements, women's initiatives, and women's human rights defenders working for gender equality under Taliban rule. Her work includes leading research on Afghan women's movements, delivering trainings to build capacity, and facilitating learning exchanges among women human rights defenders. In 2023, she briefed the UN Security Council on the situation of women civic actors and marginalized communities in Afghanistan. Zubaida also assists at-risk defenders and journalists by publicizing cases and securing emergency assistance, and brings over a decade of advancing women's and children's rights and democracy in Afghanistan and internationally. So now let's dive into our discussion. And remember, use the Q&A button for your questions. To start, let's talk about the key challenges faced by our movement now. Zubaida, in a context where Taliban have institutionalized gender apartheid and dismantled formal legal protections, what does advancing justice look like today, and how are Afghan women redefining resistance under total exclusion?
Thank you, Nancy, for including me in this very important conversations, and I'm honored to be alongside my co-panelists who are all doing amazing work in their own fields. I will first just provide a little bit of the context, and then I will jump into your question. As our audience might know, the Taliban have institutionalized gender apartheid in Afghanistan. IANGEL and Femina together have documented 135 edicts that directly target women and impose systematic exclusion of women from education, employment, mobility, and public life in general. The Taliban's Prevention of Vice and Promotion of Virtue law empowers their Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which operates outside of the judicial system as a separate entity, giving it broad authority to enforce these edicts and to impose restrictions on women and marginalized communities. The law places the Taliban's interpretation of Hanafi jurisprudence above any other legal system, silencing even other Islamic scholars, minorities, and secular rights in Afghanistan. Enforcement is also controlled directly by the Taliban Amir with no judicial independence or accountability. Taliban also recently published a criminal code which further imposes obedience on women. According to this criminal code, punishment for harming animals is more than punishment for domestic violence. Formal legal protections are dismantled in Afghanistan. Courts, ministries, and other relevant entities, as well, and civil society organizations and safe shelters for women that once addressed women's rights and provided protection to women, they no longer exist. All judges from the former government, including 270 women, have been dismissed and they have been replaced with Taliban-affiliated men, mostly ethnic Pashtuns. These judges generally lack formal legal training and issue rulings based on the Taliban edicts rather than established legal principles. So gender justice today cannot rely on the state when it comes to Afghanistan. Afghan women, therefore, are pursuing justice through international mechanisms like the ICC and ICJ, even as they recognize that international law has often been selectively enforced in grave human rights conditions, and we have seen this across the world, including in Gaza. Several countries are pursuing a case against the Taliban for violating CEDAW, and the ICC has issued arrest warrants for certain Taliban leaders. But more needs to be done, and there needs to be transparency in international human rights processes. They must center women of Afghanistan, and they must not turn into political bargaining chips. For example, the ICJ process is led by Germany. At the same time, they have handed over the Afghan embassy to Taliban. So there is a double standard and how they implement and how they use these processes that we put our trust in and our energy in, and we try to be an active part of as bargaining chips with the Taliban. For example, the UK says they stand with the women of Afghanistan. On the other side, now they have banned student visas for women who are banned from education inside Afghanistan and were hoping to pursue scholarships in the UK and continue their higher education. So we hear a lot of words, many states and statements, including at the CSW this week, saying they stand with the women of Afghanistan, but in action that doesn't really translate to anything. And sadly, for example, the way the UK is taking the right to education from women is similar to what the Taliban are doing inside Afghanistan. Against this backdrop for Afghan women, now gender justice for the women of Afghanistan means preserving their agency and dignity and their total erasure and extremism, an extremist form of oppression known to exist in this day and age. So what we see happening to the women of Afghanistan is not seen anywhere in the world. No other country imposes a blanket ban, for example, on women's education. No other country bans the voices of women. No other country bans, for example, windows that face women. These are the lens to which the Taliban have gone to oppress women. Despite everything, women of Afghanistan are resisting every day. When the Taliban took over, women protested in the streets across Afghanistan. They faced violence, abduction, torture, and even killings. Now that the public space have been taken from them, women have turned their homes to sites of feminist action. They are running secret schools that both IANGEL and Femina work with these groups. They have formed feminist networks, support networks, legal advice groups, and small businesses from their homes. They are using whatever resource that is at their disposal as a long-term strategy of defiance, while also losing hope every day for international support. So really, they're really depending on themselves and the work that they are doing inside. Women are operating anonymously as journalists and writers. They are sharing their stories and struggles with the wider world. Just a few weeks ago, a group of women once again took the streets in Kabul to mark International Women's Day and make their demands heard. However, the world's attention is shifting away from Afghanistan, and they're focusing more on global affairs elsewhere. Sadly, few countries are paying attention to this historic and extreme and exemplary civic resistance that Afghan women have been staging for the past 4 years. Just imagine if you live in a country that bans your education, your even access to parks. You cannot, as a woman in Afghanistan, you cannot go and enter a park and take a walk. These spaces are banned to you. Women are standing up against a terrorist group placed in power through a deeply flawed peace deal, which was at the time led by the US government. On top of the world's lack of attention to their plight, women of Afghanistan are also confronting intersectional realities, which is very important to note. Women from marginalized ethnic groups, for example, Hazaras, Shias, they face layered discrimination and abuse. Access to resources, technology, and opportunities depend not only on who you are, but also what part of Afghanistan you live in. So women sitting in the cities might have more access, while women in the villages, we don't know what is really happening to them and how this oppression is impacting them. Um, Afghan women in exile also have successfully served as an extension of the voices of those in the front lines. We have seen them leveraging transnational advocacy, documenting abuses, and maintaining pressure on international actors. So, for the women of Afghanistan, what do women need in Afghanistan right now? Gender justice requires centering their voices and the knowledge that they produce every day. It means refusing the diplomatic normalization of the Taliban, especially when no rights benchmarks are in place. A troubling trend that is already happening across with various countries. It also requires supporting in-country feminist networks and investing in long-term accountability mechanisms. So in practical this means providing funding to informal women's civic groups across Afghanistan who are the front of the resistance. Resources that would allow them to get on the internet, to attend these events, to make their voices heard, to continue online education. These women need minimal support. They need laptops, they need mobile phones. If anyone is wondering how these women can be supported in their fight for gender justice, unfortunately, from a very vibrant civil society scene that we had during the Republic, now this is what's left of it. It's these women trying to preserve the civic space, trying to educate their communities, and also empower their communities to make human rights demands. While we are looking at international legal mechanisms, and hoping that they will be useful to us, we also need to pay attention to what's happening inside and support these women, protect those spaces, because they are not only making demands for themselves. Like always, Afghan women are making inclusive demands for the rights of everyone. And there are organizations that are trying to support them, like IANGEL and Femina, that work with these frontline defenders. I will close it with that for now, and if there are any further questions, I'm happy to respond to.
Thank you so much, Zubaida. I will say, Afghan women's courage and resilience in the face of these horrific circumstances is just so remarkable and inspiring. And it's really true that we are our own. We must save ourselves. We must, we are all Afghan women now, and we all have a responsibility to keep this grave injustice front and center, and to not forget the women that are there, and to continue working across borders to provide hope. So now let's broaden our lens and look at a different kind of challenges, the challenges from climate change. Natalia, we know that humanity faces the interconnected environmental threats of climate change, loss of biodiversity, and pollution. What are the gendered impacts of this triple planetary crisis, and why is it important to focus on them in a discussion of access to justice and gender equality?
Indeed, thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you to IANGEL for enabling this space, and thank you to my co-panelists for sharing their time and their knowledge today as well. So yes, as you mentioned, climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution are current, what has been called the triple planetary crisis, and they impact everyone, however, not in the same ways. The triple planetary crisis exacerbates pre-existing inequalities and vulnerabilities, and the gender dimensions of the crisis tend to be ignored or excluded from mainstreaming. So understanding how environmental law, climate change law, and the right to equal protection under the law intersect is crucial to ensuring climate justice for all. The understandings of the gender dimensions of the triple planetary crisis seem to get locked into seeing women and girls as either uniquely vulnerable bearers of harm and suffering, or either as resources or tools to be employed in responding and adapting to climate change, for example. And at the same time, it tends to focus only on women and girls, excluding other affected groups and individuals, and perpetuating the notion that gender equals women only. But the relationship with the environmental crisis is complex, is nuanced, is contextual, and is shaped by intersecting social identities and experiences of social oppression. Harmful stereotypes that are based in patriarchal notions of what femininity and gender roles are further being intensified and reproduced by the climate crisis and the triple planetary crisis. Jobs like caring and searching for water and firewood are overwhelmingly performed by women, while their participation in decision-making is limited, for example. And the triple planetary crisis puts an additional strain on already precarious conditions of inequality and power imbalances. Women and girls often face legal, social, and economic disadvantages that are also rooted in these unequal power relations and patriarchal structures. And as the Committee on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights, General Comment 27 of 2025, mentioned, this environmental crisis exacerbate gender inequalities, particularly in access to land, natural resources, and essential services. So, for example, for women in rural areas, secure access to land is crucial for their subsistence, the access to essential goods and services, and their protection from violence. Further, we see that gender inequality is compounded by the unequal burden of unpaid care and domestic work, which is also identified by the climate crisis. So, for example, the increased time and effort that is put to secure water, or the altering work patterns that derive from the rising temperatures, all affect pre-existing gender roles and norms. Another example where we can see this playing out is climate migration and how it affects people differently depending on patriarchal gender roles. Significantly, in the aftermath of natural disasters, gender stereotypes play a huge role in determining who gets to access the benefits that are being provided. Heteronormative understandings of what family composition is prevent people that do not conform to those understandings to access relief and remedies that are necessary for their survival. Those at the intersection, as Zobaida was also mentioning, of multiple axes of oppression experience a distinct form of discrimination that needs to be acknowledged and recognized in order to prevent or avoid reproducing oppressive power dynamics. And lastly, gender-based violence is also being intensified by the ecological crisis. Environmental and human rights defenders are constantly facing life threats and fighting, while at the same time fighting for their rights and territories. In the case of female defenders, a common pattern has emerged. Gender stereotypes tend to be present both as a cause for their persecution, but also as a driver of impunity. In many cases, female defenders are not being identified as such, so their work is being undermined and ignored. And this stems from the imaginary that women do not belong in public spaces, so women should not be fighting for their rights. Hence, their work is constantly delegitimized, and their cases are not treated with the same reinforced due diligence as the cases of other environmental and human rights defenders. And this reality is particularly acute in Latin America, a region that has been at the infamous top as one of the most dangerous places for environmental and human rights defenders for several years now. The 2018 Escazú Agreement included, among others, provisions specifically directed to address this issue and to protect environmental and human rights defenders in the region. It is considered to be the first treaty in the world to do this, and it urges the states to take adequate and effective measures to recognize, protect, and promote their human rights, as well as their ability to exercise these rights, and the state's obligation to punish threats and attacks against environmental and human rights defenders. And lastly, I want to mention the recent advisory opinion 3225 by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights on states' obligations amid the climate crisis, which was also very clear and explicit in establishing that states have the obligation to eliminate stereotypes from their administrative and judicial processes, and to apply a reinforced due diligence and guarantee access to justice in the case of environmental and human rights defenders, and explicitly mentioned the importance, the reinforced importance of doing this for people in situations of vulnerability, which includes women defenders.
Thank you, Natalia. It's so true that climate is a gender issue, but mainstream coverage of most climate issues and this crisis ignores the serious impacts that inequality has on this threat that we all face. And I appreciate your comments, and it's nice to hear there are still glimmers of hope out there from the work that lawyers are doing. So I thank you for that. Turning now, Shreya, you have experience in technology and data protection law. So why don't you tell us, how do digital spaces create risks and opportunities for advancement of rights of women and girls?
Thank you for the question, Nancy, and I'm honored to be here, and thank you for the chance for making me speak on this topic. I love to create awareness about this. I'll start with the risk in digital space through an example many of us may have seen on the news or may have heard from someone we know. So, imagine a woman who has just left an abusive relationship and she's trying to rebuild her life. Now, she does everything she could think of about her safety, like changing her phone number or updating social media or even moving to a new apartment. But her data or her information still surfaces. Now, this happens because ordinary digital traces, it continues to reveal pieces of her life. Now, it can be found on people search websites that publishes like addresses from public records, or it can be like an old online shopping account that may be linked to her phone number, or she might just be tagged and that quietly shows where she spends most of her time. Now, none of this requires like a sophisticated hacking. It just relies on the data that is legally collected and poorly protected, or automatically it is shared over or across platforms. So, like survivors like this often spends months submitting removal requests to dozens of websites just to remove their digital footprint. So, when we talk about digital risk, it is not about the criminal actors buying like secret database. It's about like an ordinary data or default platform design. So now, if the legal framework requires compliances like data minimization or easy opt-out from data brokers and privacy by design settings, which is not just limited to an MNC, but it's also for the small sectors and startups, then the same woman has a chance in real life to stay safe. Now, if not, then the burden is entirely on her to manage this complex digital trail while also dealing with her trauma like housing and employment. So to say like this is why data protection is not just like abstract and it is a frontline safety issue. Another example could be like a teenage girl reporting some harassment at her school, online harassment at her school. And the abuse continues on group chats and social media. So screenshots are shared and altered and reposted on her name. Now, when she complains it to her teacher or a police officer or somewhere, she is just asked to block just block them. But blocking does not stop someone from like creating another account and sharing her images and circulating rumors that will probably follow her to her college application or job background search. So, like, her digital reputation becomes an evidence against her rather than an evidence of harm. But there is another side to the story now. Now imagine, like, contrast this with what happens when digital systems are designed with data protection rights in mind. Um, we have workspaces that reporting platforms that allows anonymous documentation of harassment. Now, when systems like this are designed with privacy and data protection in mind, they make it safer for people to report the harm. Another very good example is the taxi cab app, which includes the in-app safety features that allows users to share like live trip location with trusted contacts, or have an access emergency button, or some places you can just directly contact the police station. So for women and girls, features like real-time location sharing and easy incident reporting can make routine activities such as taking like a late night ride. It makes it safer, and it makes it significantly safer. Now, it shows how thoughtful design can turn everyday technology into a practical safety tool rather than just being a risk. So these technologies and apps can either expose women to harm or give them tools to claim their rights. So question for us as policymakers and lawyers is, who controls this data cycle? Who profits from them? Or whose safety is considered at like this design stage? Because for many women and girls, digital risk is not an abstract cyber issue. It is about that they can safely order a taxi or apply for a job or leave a relationship or speak in a group chat without their data being used. To conclude, I would like to say that if we embed gender responsive data protection, we turn ordinary technologies into infrastructure for access to justice. If not, we just turn everyday apps into surveillance tools in the hands of abusers. So that's from my end. And if anyone has any comment, I would love to answer.
Thanks so much, Shreya. That's really fascinating. It's understanding these digital issues is empowering, but it's also pretty scary in the world we live in today. So my wish, let's follow up on Shreya's comments. And how do AI algorithms perpetuate misogynistic traditions and structural inequality? And what are the key legal issues that you see in those issues?
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you very much, my fellow panelists. And I'm so honored to be part of this very important discussion. So there are two parts of this question. First is how AI systems can perpetuate the same misogynistic traditions and these structural inequalities. And second is the challenges we are facing right now. So I will address both one by one. So listening to Zubaida, Natalia, and Shreya, we can see that different systems produce inequality in different ways. Like Zubaida discussed about the situation of women in Afghanistan, and Natalia discussed how environmental crisis has been affecting women especially, and Shreya explained how digital systems can create new risks for women. Artificial intelligence is a newer layer of technology, but in many ways it mirrors the same patterns. Because AI systems learn from data, and the data reflects the societies we live in. So the discrimination we sometimes see in AI systems is not entirely new. It often reflects inequalities that women have been confronting in law, society, and every day for a very long time. The only difference with all of these systems to AI technology is AI technology has a very large scale. Like if there is a software of AI algorithm and somebody is using it in the USA, so maybe simultaneously somebody else and maybe hundreds and thousands of people are using the same system worldwide. So then the scale gets bigger. If there is a system is discriminatory, the scale is so big. So that's why it's very crucial to talk about it. Let me briefly mention a few examples about it. One example involve hiring algorithms that companies use to screen job applications. These systems are trained on historical hiring data. If certain industry historically hired more men than women, the algorithm may learn to favor male applicants. Even if the system is not explicitly designed to discriminate, the outcome can still disadvantage women. Secondly, another example involves facial recognition softwares and facial recognition technology. Research has shown that these systems often give significantly higher error rates in identifying female faces, especially the women of color, than the men. And this raises very important questions about identity. It's like so these AI systems are more likely to misidentify and exclude women from the systems, and it also affects for their identity verification, their security screening, and access to services. And other example can be, so there are some AI image generation tools in the market right now. So we put some like casual selfie and casual photos into it, and we can have that like corporate photos with very good like corporate and attires. So another research says that when we put some photo, like if a woman wearing hijab, like I'm wearing right now, so if I put a photo in that applications, so when they give the AI generated image, so they replace hijab with AI generated hairs. So this create an like it raises very important concerns about identity distortion and discrimination against visible expression of religious identity. Another very major concern at the moment is the deep fake technologies, which are which can create highly realistic and synthetic videos. And unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of non-consensual deepfake content online, including the pornography, these target women. So these create new form of digital harassment and reputational harm that existing legal frameworks are still struggle to address. These examples show that how these misogynistic traditions and these structural inequalities in the society, which have already been prevailing in the society, are now perpetuating in AI systems. So this leads to the second part of the question. So what are the legal challenges we are facing in this situation and with the system having AI in the society right now? So one major challenge is the black box problem. Many AI systems operate in a way that are very difficult to explain or interpret. So if somebody believes that they were treated unfairly by an automated system, it may be very difficult to understand how the decision was made. And the second challenge is that traditional anti-discrimination laws were designed to address intentional discrimination by an identifiable human actor. But algorithm discrimination can occur even when no human actor is involved because the bias is embedded in the training data system. The third issue involves access to evidence. Companies often treat their algorithm and data sets as the proprietary information. So the trade secrecy protection can make it very difficult. Make it very difficult to like verify and to get the evidence out of it. So finally, and then another challenge is accountability and responsibility. So AI is not something like I am making it and I'm just selling it in the market. So there are a lot of factors involved in it. So some companies are like manufacturing the training data, and then other company or developers are like developing the software or AI, and then there is another company, another platform who deployed that specific software or AI systems, and then there are the end users. So there is a like kind of a chain of responsibility. So the bigger challenge is right now, if AI system is doing the discrimination, so who should be held accountable to it. Whether all of these actors should be accountable or any one of them should be accountable. So this is the very big challenge right now. And finally, the challenge is the issue of cross-border regulation. Because if AI system, maybe if AI system is developed in California and it is deployed in China and it is being used by people around the world, so then the regulation, like which law, if there is a discrimination, so which law to follow, because most of the legal system are national. So this create gaps in accountability and raises very difficult questions about how victims can seek remedies. So when we think about AI and gender justice, the issue is not simply biased technology. The deeper issue is that automated system can perpetuate the same misogynistic traditions and structural inequalities that women have been facing for a very long time in this society, while legal regulations are still trying to keep pace with. Legal regulations are slower than AI, so we just like need to try to like keep pace with that. So this is all from my side, and over to you, Nancy. And
Wow. Thank you so much. I'm just thinking, I'm a litigation lawyer. I'm thinking, well, okay, there's this discrimination embedded in the system. Who do you put on the stand for cross-examination? How do when it makes these judgments, they're just from the black box. That's definite legal challenges. But okay, so now we have a clear-eyed appreciation for the challenges we face in working for gender justice in all of these different areas. Let's discuss resources and strategy and innovation. Natalia, with so many crises, I think it's easy to overlook how feminist advocates can make a real difference. Why don't you tell us about the impact that they're making, and how are women and girls strengthening access to justice in climate litigation?
Sure. So climate litigation has been increasingly becoming an important tool for challenging state inaction on climate change and for demanding greater attention to social and economic injustices, both domestically and globally. And the differentiated impacts of certain groups due to the effects of climate change are being slowly addressed in climate litigation. So, for example, there are a number of cases that specifically address the impacts of climate change or the triple planetary crisis, more broadly speaking, on children and future generations or on indigenous groups. And other cases have started to broad up arguments that account for the gendered impacts of the climate crisis, but this is to a much lesser extent. And as a result, climate litigation has yet to engage meaningfully with the analysis of the gender differentiated impacts of climate change. So even though there are more than 2,500, and I think the number might actually be bigger now, be higher now, climate change related cases in the world, less than 10 of those focus on the gender impacts of climate change. And this is despite the growing recognition of the gender causes and the impacts of climate change, and despite the significant role that women, girls, and gender diverse communities and activists are doing at the forefront of the climate justice movement. So one example of climate litigation that I wanted to talk about today is the Clima Signorinen case. This is a case that was decided on April 2024 by the European Court of Human Rights, and it has been considered a landmark case, especially as in climate litigation, especially as it established an obligation to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions as a human rights duty. This case highlights the intersectional nature of the gendered identities and vulnerabilities, and it is relevant to our discussion today because the applicants in this case were women over the age of 70 and their representative association. And each individual applicant in this case argued that they, as older women, were more severely impacted by climate change, in particularly by heat waves, than the rest of the population. So it was the combination of their gender and age that made them uniquely at risk, as they argued. The applicants produced evidence that show how overall women above 70 75 years of age were at greater risk of premature loss of life, severe impairment of life, and of family and private life. Despite this, the court rejected the individual applications. It only proceeded the association's application. And the court found that there was a failure to establish victim status. The court held that the applicants in this case failed to show a critical medical condition to be accorded that victim status. So what happens here is that the court is establishing a high threshold to what can be considered victim in these type of cases, and this has the unavoidable effect of excluding underrepresented voices. Welcoming such voices has been one of the most important advances in climate litigation, with, as I mentioned, growing number by marginalized groups who are usually being excluded from lawmaking or decision-making spaces. So while it is true that not everyone should be able to claim victim status, it is crucial that certain individuals can. This is essential to ensure access to justice and to other procedural rights in the context of climate change. So in this case, we saw that the court discussed extensively the evidence that was presented before them, repeatedly finding scientific evidence that this group of women, of older women, were suffering and dying from rising temperatures and heat waves. But there's no mention of this in the court's ruling, and no duty was created for states to better understand and address these impacts. So even though this outcome is sadly unsurprising, it is still discouraging that after carefully reviewing and assessing evidence of the disproportionate impacts, the court simply failed to engage with their legal consequences. But not all is lost. I also want to mention again the Inter-American Court of Human Rights Advisory Opinion 32 of 2025, because even though this opinion is far from perfect, it does take an important step towards recognizing gender as a key determinant of climate vulnerability and in identifying gender-responsive obligations of states. And this was embedded from the beginning, from the very request by the states of Colombia and Chile to the court. In this case, the court explicitly recognizes the disproportionate impact that climate change has on women, particularly those living in poverty in rural areas or communities that rely heavily on natural resources. It also mentions how women and girls are at a greater risk of gender-based violence in the aftermath of disasters, and highlighted the need for an intersectional approach that considers overlapping factors such as gender, race, ethnicity, class, age, among others. It further recognized the heightened vulnerability of gender-diverse communities during and after climate-induced disasters. And it mentioned, as I talked about in the previous question, it explicitly addressed the situation of women environmental defenders. So as we can see, even though there's a lot of work still need to be done, climate litigation is being increasingly engaging with the gender impacts of climate change, and I think there is more that we can expect more in the future. There are a number of cases that are currently under review or are currently going through the different stages of the procedures, both at domestic, regional, and international levels. So I think we can all expect more outcomes that will hopefully engage more meaningfully with the gender impacts of climate change.
Thank you so much. As with most things, Natalia, I think the more that women are included and gender is accounted for, the better off the whole world will be. And climate change is certainly on the front lines there. My wish, as with climate litigation, I wonder what role can lawyers play in pursuing accountability across borders, and how can international law strengthen women's access to justice?
Thank you, Nancy. So when we talk about accountability across borders, so one of the central questions is how lawyers can respond to harms that no longer fit neatly within one legal system. So it's across borders. Many of the challenges affecting women today involve actors, technologies, and institutions operating across multiple countries. Like a company may be headquartered in one jurisdiction and its technology is developed in another jurisdiction, like I told you earlier, and then the people affected by those technologies are located somewhere else entirely. So in these situations, lawyers often have to navigate several legal systems in order to pursue accountability. One important role lawyers play is connecting different legal systems. They have to think strategically about how to connect different legal systems. So when harms affecting women cross national boundaries, the legal response cannot remain confined to a single jurisdiction and single country. Lawyers therefore have to think strategically about where claims can be brought, which law applies, and how different legal systems might interact. This often requires combining domestic laws with international human rights laws and regional legal mechanisms. Another key role that lawyers can play is using international human rights laws to establish standards and create pressures for reforms. International instruments such as Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that is CEDAW, set clear expectations for how states should address discrimination and protect women's rights. Even though international law does not always provide direct enforcement mechanism, that we know that international law has not that binding force and enforcement mechanism, but still it plays a very important role in shaping norms and guiding legal reforms. So lawyers can rely on these frameworks to argue that government have specific obligations to ensure equality and access to justice. Other than states, we see as right now many of the actors shaping women's lives today in the society, not only state actors, but also private entities, including technology companies, multinational corporations, and actors within global supply chain. So when these actors contribute to human rights violation, lawyers can use international frameworks to hold them accountable. One important example is UN guiding principles on business and human rights. So this instrument established that companies have responsibility to respect human rights. So lawyer can use these principles to support litigation whenever they are trying to protect women from it. Lawyer can also play a very crucial role in addressing what are often called the jurisdictional gap. Where harms occur across borders, it's sometimes unclear that which country have authority to hear a case or which law should apply. This can make it extremely difficult for victims to obtain remedies. Through strategic litigation and advocacy, lawyer can push courts, and also the lawyer and the policy making can rethink how jurisdiction, responsibility, and remedy should operate in an increasingly interconnected world. So in that case, again, when we are talking about the cross-border thing, so international law is always like there and it comes to play with. So international law strengthens women access to justice in two very important ways. First is establish global standards, like I talk about the CEDAW and these business and human rights, like UN guiding principles of business and human rights that government and institutions should follow and can be held accountable to. And the second, it creates additional forums for accountability when domestic system fails or unwilling to act. These additional forums are or can be UN treaty bodies, regional human rights courts, and the periodic review processes. So these systems create spaces where violation can be documented and challenged. Even when these mechanisms cannot directly enforce decisions, like I already said, that international law doesn't have that binding authority, but still they can play a very powerful role in exposing violation, documenting violation, and encouraging reforms. In our world right now, where many of the forces shaping women's lives operate across borders, it is crucial to adopt legal approaches that are just as global as challenges themselves.
Thanks so much for that. I mean, it's so true. It's true that international law is not as powerful as we would like it to be. At the same time, I think we're all glad that it exists as a framework that we can employ, and it's an avenue for gender justice activists to use and employ to advance these issues because there isn't any other to reach across borders. So thank you so much for that. And in the same vein, Shreya, what are some concrete ways that younger lawyers or students can contribute to advancing gender justice across borders?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think the key is that the entire legal ecosystem, from starting from the law school to law firms to bar associations, they create an opportunity for young lawyers to contribute to gender justice from the very start of their career. So, and for young lawyers, they can contribute to gender justice across borders by treating every stage of their training as a real opportunity to create an impact. An important pathway is like legal aid work that a law school can actively promote. And many law schools around the world already do that, and it can create real impact on communities. Like, for example, when I was in law school in India, legal aid was actually a part of my curriculum. And in my final year, students used to travel as a group to rural communities. And we would literally go door to door speaking to women about their basic legal rights, like fundamental rights or access to their government benefits, or even marital rights under the law. These were just basic rights. Now, young law students can also talk about data protection and privacy and the importance of privacy and safety on the phones. So even in rural areas, they might not know about this, and young lawyers can help talking about it. So, what struck me like during this process the most is that many women simply did not know that these rights and protections existed. So sometimes the most powerful legal intervention is just a conversation at somebody's doorstep, explaining what the law already guarantees them. So this is just like a general talking and general idea about the law. Experiences like this, I think it shows law students that gender justice is not only shaped in courtrooms or international forums, it happens in villages, like in community centers and everyday conversation when legal knowledge actually becomes empowerment. So many law schools institutionalize legal aid, internship with NGOs, and pro bono work early in their legal training. Now, they not just teach law, but they are building a generation of lawyers who see access to justice as the core part of their profession. So then, like an internship with an NGO during law school, they are also often seen as a learning experience. And in reality, law students are often contributing to like meaningful work, and they prepare reports, and they do research and translate like legal resources for communities. And that kind of research can be used as a part of litigation or submission to international bodies and broader human right advocacy across the countries and even nations. So even law firms also have a role to play. Like junior associate, they often think that pro bono is something that you do later. But firms are increasingly partnering with gender justice organization or founding one like Nancy did, and which can be a matter like gender justice or workplace harassment or digital privacy complaints. So beyond internships and pro bono work, another powerful way a young lawyer can contribute is through seminars. Young lawyers can like organize know your rights session on topics like online safety and workplace harassment or access to legal remedies. It doesn't have to be like a large conference. It can be like a community workshop, university event, or even virtual sessions that create legal literacy that enable women and girls to actually use the law that exists. And finally, it can be like bar associations that can institutionalize the kind of engagement. A strong example is like bar association models where new lawyers can complete an initial few hours of pro bono work as a part of their admission. So that does two things actually. It normalizes public interest work at the very start of their career, and it connects young lawyers with organization that is doing this kind of work, like gender bias violence or data protection. So imagine like if bar associations worldwide adopt a similar structure, and if some of those pro bono working hours are directed towards cross-border genders and justice projects, then we would be building a generation of lawyers from whom gender justice is not just like a side project, but it is a professional norm. So finally, like to conclude, so the pathway is quite clear. Start with like legal aid work and community engagements in law schools. Use internships to support like real advocacy work. Take pro bono work seriously, like within law firms. And then through seminars and community outreach, the legal knowledge can be shared. And then finally, even bar association can recognize these kind of work as legal training. So just to conclude, if we embed gender justice into the earlier stage of legal practice, young lawyers will not be waiting to contribute. They will already be shaping the field. So yeah, that's from
Thank you so much. I appreciate the plug for pro bono lawyers. We need more of them. They're valuable and they play a key role in advancing gender justice. So, moving back to really Zubaida, what lessons can the global gender justice movement learn from Afghan women's organized resistance in one of the most repressive environments of the world? We're running a little short of time, but I really want to, Afghan women are so strong and so amazing. I really want you to share these insights.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for the opportunity. I just want to make a little plug and say what Shuri and the rest of my panelists shared on social media, online safety, etc. resonates, because while Afghan women are depending on social media and internet to resist, educate, and remain connected with the rest of the world, their oppressors are also using it to oppress women further, to track them down, to then use that information to abduct them, imprison them, torture them. It's becoming just another space for their oppressors to facilitate women's oppression. They're using internet to promote and normalize their violence, spread misinformation, and that ultimately aims to contribute to sustaining their regime of gender apartheid. In a context like this, the need for digital safety and digital hygiene strategies and tools is even more severe. Because access to justice and protection is non-existent, and online activism is utilizing online activism and online means are being used by feminist activists in Afghanistan to sustain their work, but it also means that they're literally risking their lives to do that. So this is a huge need and a huge gap for WHRDs and feminist activists inside Afghanistan to have these tools and resources for physical safety, digital safety and digital hygiene, and ways that can help them safely continue to mobilize and connect with each other online, because that's the only remaining avenue for them, which the Taliban tried to take away, by the way. They also had a 48-hour internet shutdown a few months back, because they saw that's where women are also trying to raise their voices. Now, coming to your question, Nancy, as I said, Afghan women continue education, feminist networks, support systems for their communities, and journalism, even when public spaces and legal protections are erased from them. This is a testament to their that resistance can adapt, and it can survive, and it can persist, even in a context where it's so closed. The civic space is so closed. But I also want to mention that this should not be glorified. No woman should have to fight under these circumstances and fight for these rights, which is the right to education, the right to access to public spaces and parks. So there is meaningful solidarity to women of Afghanistan, understanding how they are showing us that even under those contexts you can fight, and if there is the willingness to fight there, I think it's on us to use the space that we still have on other parts of the world to be the extension of their voices, not just them, women anywhere under oppression. Authoritarian actors do take cues from each other, and rollbacks of rights everywhere embolden the Taliban. It emboldened actors, oppressive actors in other parts of the world. That's why it's really important to learn from the women of Afghanistan and to not settle for the bare minimum. So the women of Afghanistan are not negotiating just for access to education or access to certain sectors in certain ways. They are demanding the full spectrum of their rights, because just asking for community-based education or online schooling or right to work to unlimited sectors or negotiating the bare minimum is not enough. It should not be enough. Our international colleagues are negotiating on those issues with the Taliban. They are like, oh, let them at least do this, let them at least do that. And that has resulted, for example, in 6 months of UN staff not being able to report to office, because that's how far these key international actors bent down and it allowed and appeased to the Taliban. But women of Afghanistan are not appeasing. They're fighting and they're asking for the full spectrum of their rights, and that should be the case everywhere, because nothing replaces formal education for everyone. Nothing replaces the right to work for everyone and dignity for everyone. I think when we talk about not asking for bare minimum, I think we should also not allow Afghanistan to become the baseline for what's acceptable. So other countries shouldn't be able to get inspiration and say, well, at least we are not Afghanistan. You can go to work, you can study, so don't complain. So, but by allowing this situation to get normalized, by allowing our politicians to go and sit with these oppressors, take photos with them, talk about constructive engagement with them, and pragmatic engagement with them, we are allowing to get that normalized, and we are allowing it for people to say, well, at least we are not Afghanistan, because that's not okay. Women of Afghanistan, like women anywhere in the world, should be held to a higher standard, because if we don't do that in Afghanistan, we risk it happening somewhere else. Already women, LGBTQ plus communities, and other marginalized groups face rights erosion across the world, showing that the struggle of Afghan women is a part of a broader regression of rights. Afghan women rights movements have always fought for more than just women's rights. Their demands have always included rights of marginalized communities, showing that when women stand up, they stand up for everyone, not just in Afghanistan, across the world. We have seen them in Iran, other parts of the world. When women rise, they rise for everybody's rights, and this is an inspiration and listen to all of us in different parts of the world. Women of Afghanistan are now, for example, rallying their communities and working closely with them, providing education and guidance to men and women in their communities. And they know that this change will not happen overnight, but they remain hopeful for meaningful support and solidarity and action from the international community, including feminist movements, including organizations and individuals like us, they are also expanding civic activism in their own communities. So I think the other lesson is really work with your communities, really invest there and build and expand civic activism there, because we also learn that when it doesn't happen that way, when it's not grassroots, it's fragile. When the Afghanistan collapsed into the hands of the Taliban, we lost everything overnight. It's too late. It's a little too late now, but this time I think the feminist activists on the ground are choosing the right path, and under extreme oppression, they're working with their communities. They're working at the grassroots level, and they're highlighting the importance of grassroots activism led by feminists and women, which is a lesson to be learned, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Remarkable and inspiring. Thank you, Zubaida. Thank you all for these insights. I think, to me, the emerging theme is really how connected we all are to each other and to this struggle. Solidarity is not only our strength, it's key. It's our key strategy for how we withstand the challenges of our times and build hope together. So we do want to reserve some time for questions, so I'm just going to give you a challenge, and I'd like you to, in 1 minute, tell me what's your top suggestion for how a feminist activist now can stay hopeful. This is open to the panel. Just a very quick, what's a key suggestion that you have for people to stay hopeful in these times?
Maybe I can start.
Okay, and then we'll go to Natalia after.
Yeah, okay. So this is a very important question, and I know we are running out of time, so I will be very quick. So I have like two, three things, but I will like maybe stick to one of those, which I think is very important at the moment. It's like I think we should keep like centering the voices and leadership of women who are directly affected by these challenges. So I think whether we are talking about the resilience of Afghan women, that is like women of Afghanistan, their struggle, their resilience is so inspiring. So it gives us so hope, like very, very hope. And the women who are defending their lands and communities in the face of climate crisis, and the survivors of who are navigating digital harms, the victims and the survivors who are closest to the problem have the closest and the deepest insight knowledge of how system and these injustices work. So it is crucial to add their voices in shaping advocacy and policy response. We should always look for those women who are a victim of these violences, who are the victim of these inequalities and injustice. So we should add them with us in leadership positions and adding their voices in our networks, so that like we can have the insights, and they have the deeper knowledge, and I think sometimes they have the solution as well. So they just need the platform to talk about it. So I think we should add them, and then again we should strengthen. So for this thing we should need to strengthen the transboundary collaboration between human rights like women rights activists, human rights activities.
Oh, I think we got a frozen. Technical difficulties. I think my wish has frozen. Let's go to Natalia.
Sure.
She unfreezes.
Sure. So yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what Mawish was just saying. So on the one hand, and I think this goes back to something that Sobaida also mentioned, that I think it's crucial that we all acknowledge and avoid glorifying the resilience, the idea that, oh yeah, these women, I mean, we should acknowledge the work that they are doing, but we should not, and I'm gonna use your word, Zubaida, because I think it's perfect here. We should not glorify that, and we should all be working together to overcome all the challenges and all the gender injustices that we are facing. And I think this goes to what Mawish was also just saying, and to really achieve epistemic justice as well. So we can really understand what is going through, and in the words of feminist standpoint theory scholars, like we can learn, not only learn, but like people who are at the margins of the of society have a better understanding of how the system works because of their situated knowledge. So that's why I think, as Mawish was saying, it is important to recenter and reshift our focus towards the periphery to really elevate the voices and the knowledge of marginalized people. But also, I think it is important that we not only rely on the work of marginalized communities to avoid epistemic exploitation and objectification as well. So it is very important that we do not rely solely on the work that they do, and this happens as well in the climate change and climate litigation forum, that we all, as allies, we collaborate with each other, and that we keep using spaces such as this one to enable cross-fertilization and to learn from each other and to foster knowledge exchange.
Wonderful. Shreya, do you have a
Yeah.
1-minute best tip for
Yeah,
how to build hope here?
wrap up. But when I was attending these bridge projects that are there for the Afghan women, it's so hopeful, and I did not know. And when you come across a situation like that, and when you actually see them, and you see how hopeful they are, and they fight every day of their lives and still stay hopeful, and they're amazingly strong. So I think, in my experience, hope comes from seeing how people across legal ecosystem continue to contribute. For I think even law students or young lawyers can do legal aid, community work, so that they know that these exist and they know how important their work is. So yeah, I mean, that's from my end, and I would really love more lawyers to come into this segment and know what is going on and how important their work is.
Okay, well, it looks like we have a couple of questions. So I just opened up this window. I'm new to this, so we have a question for Natalia. For advocates who may not be climate lawyers, what are some ways civil society organizations can support gender-sensitive climate litigation efforts?
Thank you so much for that question. I think one of the, I would say, great things of climate, like the climate crisis, or climate change in general, is its global reach. So, it also touches upon the interdisciplinary nature of this crisis, and I think this is important because, precisely in the climate change and environmental law arena, we see how other fields are constantly being called upon and constantly being incorporated into policy making and lawmaking and climate litigation efforts as well. We see how important science is for climate attribution. So I think there are many different ways in which civil society organizations can support this from a gender perspective. And I think it is particularly important to do this from that gender perspective and through that gender lens, precisely because mainstreaming climate action has been increasingly acknowledging the gender differentiated impacts, as I mentioned, but it's still far from being done. There's still a lot of work being done, and there's still a lot of issues and a lot of realities that are being neglected, are excluded, ignored, and obscured. So I think one way that civil society organizations can help in climate litigation and in general in climate action efforts is by sharing their work, sharing their knowledge, and just applying that gender lens through to places where it is dominantly not being applied to.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question. As traditional laws may be ill-equipped, is the judicial system in even progressive countries able to keep pace with digital harassment and AI bias against women. So I open that to Shreya or Mawish.
Let me just read the question again.
Okay. Traditional laws may be ill-equipped. Is the judicial system, even in progressive countries, able to keep pace with
I
digital
can respond
harassment
to that.
and AI bias? You want to
So
respond?
I can respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mavish can take the AI part. But no, I think even in US, because I studied the data protection law from UC Berkeley, and even when I was studying the policies and everything, even we in US, they are struggling being compliant and struggling with the data that is being provided. So it's not just any developing countries that are lacking the laws, but even in US, when you study the policies, it is difficult to implement it. Considering I have also worked a lot with developing countries. I think in with startups, they don't know about it, but in developed countries, at least they are aware of it. Not necessarily that they might be entirely compliant or they know what to do with it, but awareness is a thing, and yeah, I mean that's the only difference in a developed country and a developing country when they look at digital harassment as such.
Mawish, you want to add?
Yeah, I can add about especially about AI because AI is progress is so fast and legal process is slow. It's always needs some
Yeah.
time, and especially for AI thing. So these are the actors who are working on the ground, like we AI companies. They are very much against of all of these regulations. They don't want regulations, so they have been pushing to stop regulations even in progressive countries, the developed countries in the US and in the other countries. At this moment, because AI harms and AI discrimination is happening already in the society, but we don't have specific AI addressing AI discrimination and laws. So the only thing which can be done is that the already enacted anti-discrimination legal regulations, which we already have in our legal system. So judges and lawyers should use them, and especially this is like for the judges to do the progressive interpretation of these already existing anti-discrimination laws, to do progressive interpretation so that they can address the problems, and then they can provide the remedies to the victims until we get the specific AI regulation law. So I think this is the more responsibility for lawyers and the judges to do the interpretation and do the like kind of stretch the legal framing to implement those existing anti-discrimination laws to the current situation of AI biases and AI discrimination.
Thank you. So we have another question. In this moment when war is going on and women's rights are not getting honor, women are facing dangerous consequences. What steps can be taken to combat this situation? I think I'll lob that over to Zubaida because there's so much war. Now there's even more war.
So I think, I mean, I'm happy to take that question. My country has been in war for decades now, and I have seen firsthand that the first people to pay the price for these wars, the wars are fought by men, but the price is paid by women and children. They face displacement, they face sexual assault, abuse, rape, homelessness. They're impacted economically, like the toll of the humanitarian impact of the war is on women. So it's important to center the voices and demands of women there, because they're also the ones asking for peace, for inclusive peace, for fair peace, for just peace that is comes with dignity. Because in Afghanistan, we are now being told by the international community that there is prevailing peace, but the irony is that the people implementing that prevailing peace is a terrorist group, because the process through which that they came to power was not a peace process that was inclusive, just, and it didn't center the voices of women. It didn't center the voices of marginalized communities. So in order to end these wars that are started by men, I think it's really important to center the voices of women, the demands of women, and put them in decision, make sure that there's space for them in decision-making conversations and tables. Because from experience, I can tell you that women of Afghanistan are only invited to conversations when their acknowledgement is needed. The decisions are already made. The decisions are, the conversations are already had, and then they're like, oh, this is what we discussed and we decided. What do you think about this? They want our buyout, they want our support, and we should say no to that. Women should globally say no to that. The last Doha process meeting, which is on Afghanistan, that happens with international community, Taliban, various actors, excluded women at the demand of the Taliban. We were invited to the meeting as side participants after the main participants left. I was one of the people that were invited. And the minimum I could do was boycott that and say, no, I'm not going to come to a meeting that considers me as a side. And all other women invited also said no. So I think what we can do is say no, stand our ground, fight, center the voices of women in the front lines, in center. Right now in Iran, what's happening, we need to be listening to what's happening inside, not to what people are saying outside as much, because those who are impacted are those who are being bombed and losing their family members, loved ones, and homes. I will just close it with that.
This is so true, so timely. Thank you. We're about out of time, so thank you to all these wonderful panelists, inspiring speakers. I am in awe of each and every one of you. You are contributing at such a high level, and you inspire me to keep going. And I thank all of you for joining us for the discussion today, taking time out of your busy schedules to hear this conversation. We hope that you will take these insights with you as you build a strong foundation of hope. It's a brick by brick process, but this is how we sustain our work into the future. As we have seen, we cannot just sit back and wish that things were different. We have to use the power that we have to build the world that we wish to see. And I guarantee each of you is more powerful than you think you are. So I will close with the words of an Afghan woman that I saw recently. Quote, as an activist woman, I am not a victim of war, but an architect of social peace. And this is a voice that must be heard globally. This is a powerful statement and a foundation of hope for all of us. If you enjoyed this webinar, we hope you will join our mailing list. Stay in touch with us at IANGEL.org. We're very easy to find. Also, special announcement, we are currently accepting nominations of outstanding gender justice advocates for our 2026 Amel Zanoun Zouani Rights and Leadership Award. Zubaida is a recent awardee. We were so delighted to honor her. So if you know someone that qualifies, check out the details at iangel.org/call for nominations. Nominations are open, but they won't be open for much longer. So take a look, iangel.org/call for nominations. Thank you all so much for joining us today.